This episode of the Adam Messer Show is brought to you by Valhalla Books, and they have a new book called To Be by Mark Allen Gunnels. It is a suspense paranormal thriller, so check out valhallabooks.com. And I want to give a special shout out to our friends at Good Cause Marketing, Marianne Gannon-Popple and Kendra Demora. Thank you so much for the holiday card. It says, "Happy Holidays, wishing you a happy, healthy holiday season filled with all things merry and bright." We love you guys. Thanks a lot so much, and y'all have a great new year. All right, everybody, welcome, and thank you for tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show here on WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And my special guest today, she's been on the show before, and I'm really happy to have her back on with us, is author Nicole Givens Kurtz. Welcome back, Nicole. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. I had such a fun time before.
Oh, I know. And like, there's been so much that's happened since the last time we talked, and I'm really excited about like catching up. And you got a lot of new accomplishments that you've done this year, and I'm pretty excited. This is like really cool, like a lot of cool stuff that you've done, especially with publishing and all. So,
yes.
Bass, you mind playing some for us? All right, so everybody, this is a treat this week because Sebastian's, his roots started with electric guitar. And like he broke the amp out to break in the new year. So here it goes. Listen to as your face melts. Oh man, welcome back, Bass. That's awesome, dude. All right, so everybody playing at home with us, just want to give a shout out. Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening. And if you can't listen in, you can check out the podcast at your convenience. We're now on like a lot of different distribution channels, including YouTube, Audible, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and more. So check that out, and I'm looking forward to our conversation, Nicole. So I'm pretty excited to have you here. Do you mind giving a little bio about yourself with everybody?
Oh, sure. I am the owner and publisher for Mocha Memoirs Press. We are a small press located in South Carolina, and our mission is to amplify marginalized voices in speculative fiction. That includes horror, science fiction, and fantasy, and the subgenres therein. I'm also an author. I write science fiction, mostly speculative mysteries, and horror as well. I'm an educator, an editor, so I do a lot of things, but primarily I write really fun mysteries, which we're going to talk about a little bit today, with Thesmos Files.
Yeah, speaking of publishing, like you had a pretty groundbreaking anthology that you published this year, Slay. Like it's like made a lot of headlines and that kind of thing. Can you talk about that? Because like like my whole thing with fiction writing, I started with Blood Thrasher, and that's a vampire novel series here in Savannah, and I just love vampire stuff. And when you put this anthology, I was like, oh, look at this. So can you talk a little about that?
Yes. So one of the things that I miss, and me and a few other authors were talking about it, is we miss L.A. Banks, who was a phenomenal writer who passed away in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And she had written this vampire series, the Huntress Vampire series, which was set in Philadelphia, very urban, very, this is the first time I've ever read a series like that had such well-developed Black vampire and slayers characters in this urban fantasy setting. And so I was lamenting, along with a few other authors, that, we really don't have a prominent author. Like, we know that there are urban fantasy authors who are writing Black vampire, sure. But we haven't seen anything like L.A. Banks, like in terms of like being prolific, just really taking the actual, the thing about urban fantasy is they usually are supposed to, it's urban, right? So they occur in cities. But she had incorporated so much of certain areas of Philadelphia and the cultures there into the lore that I hadn't seen anything like that done that well. And so what I did was I was like, I wonder if anyone would be interested in reading stories like that, where the protagonist, the slayer, the vampire are Black people or from the African diaspora. And so I asked around for some of my friends, like, would you, authors that I really admire, like, hey, would you be interested in even writing a story like this for an anthology like this? And I actually searched Amazon, and there wasn't one like it. And I was like, yeah, we should do this. I wonder if someone, we could do this. So after I put out a few fillers with my author friends, I got a couple of anchor authors who agreed to, like, yeah, I'll write a story for that. And then I opened calls, and then we did our Indiegogo. And then that's what we did. So the whole purpose of it is providing an anthology of stories that take vampires and discuss them or give them a different treatment from the African diaspora. So we've got African stories from a few different countries in Africa. We have some that deal with Haitian culture or hoodoo practices, and then of course there's a lot that come from America. And so, and in different areas of America, right? So, it's not like Blade or it just happens in New York City. There's like Kai Leak story happens in St. Louis. It's a variety of different places. And so I love this anthology. I love Slay, Stories of the Vampire Noir, because all the stories are very, very different. And it's like a buffet, really. It's like the Golden Corral of Black vampire stories, because you can actually try all, and that's the beauty of anthologies. You know this, from having published an anthology yourself. That's the beauty of anthologies. You have all these very different stories, even if they're around a certain theme. It's still a smorgasbord of treats to try, and readers can try them and be like, oh, I love this one, I didn't like that one, but another reader's like, oh, I love the strawberry one, whatever. And so I dare anyone to read the 28 stories in Slay and not find at least 5 stories that resonates with them.
I feel like that's such a great segue too, because growing up, I used to read a lot of sci-fi, fantasy. I didn't read a whole lot of horror. I read some horror here and there, but yeah, you're right. There was not a whole lot of representation. And by that, okay, so I'm just going to put the elephant in the room, guys. Typically sci-fi, horror, stuff like that, white males write it. That's what it's been for the publishing world since, it's come out. And what I love about what you're doing with Mocha Memoirs Press and your anthology, and then you're working with these other authors, is you are sharing a platform for people who you wouldn't normally see. Like you said, Blade is, when you think of a Black vampire slayer, you think of Blade, who, because of the Marvel character or whatever in the movies. And I love the movies. Don't get me wrong, it's like one of my favorite. I thought it was awesome, like the way Wesley Snipes did the character. But now, when people think of a vampire story, they think of like Count Dracula, or they think about I don't know, something modern, maybe like
Twilight.
Well, yeah, Twilight. I forgot about that, but I was thinking more like Underworld. Kate Beckinsale. So I think it's really cool that you're like, hey, you know what? This is what I do already, and I want to put together this anthology. And I think people probably would enjoy more than 5 of the stories, honestly. So I've been picking and choosing, going back and forth, because I'm like one of those sporadic readers. I'll pick up a book, I'll read a little bit of it, because normally I like nonfiction stuff on self-development, leadership, and that kind of thing. And but I really have enjoyed going through that, and it's been out since October, I think.
October. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was so cool was you published it. Then Rachel Brune had her Stories We Tell After Midnight, Volume 2.
Yes.
And then like Halloween, I had published the Devil's Due anthology. And I think at one point, all three of us were like on, like right next to each other on the Amazon's hot new releases top 100.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome to actually know, these people that are, publishing, and, it's just cool. I mean, like, I think it's so exciting, and I'm really happy that the Slay was the success it was, and that because it's going to open up other doors too. It's going to lead to other things, and I feel like it's just a wonderful blessing, and I know it was a lot of work. I mean, like I dealt with 12 other authors, and you dealing with 28. I'm like,
it was only supposed to be 15, right? And so I of course, 15 stories was the original plan, and that's what went into the Indiegogo, right? Financing for 15 stories.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting but the more I read, going through Slush, I was like, okay, I had a pile. You know how you do this, right? You get your pile of no's and go ahead and send those out right away, the ones you know aren't going to work for your anthology. And then there's your maybes, and then there's your definite. And so my maybe pile was huge. And so I was going through trying to, like, okay, I got to get this down. I couldn't. I could not get it down to 15. I just couldn't. I was like, I must have, I think about them as like poker chips, right? I must have all of these. I just couldn't let them go. And so I was like, I'm going to have to finance the rest of it. And I did. I financed the rest of it because we did pay professional HWA rates to our authors. And so, yeah, it was, so we did do that. That was something I really wanted to do. I couldn't. I had reached the point where I felt like this was such an important anthology, and there were certain authors I really wanted to have that in order to entice them to, we're a small press, right? We're a tiny press. That I wanted to say, here is something that would make it worth your while. We're going to pay professional rates for this, and we did. And some of the authors got, by doing that, some of the authors in Slay were able to get professional status in HWA and active membership. So that was their third or their fourth or their third.
Yeah, I'm an active member of HWA as well. And I believe you are too, right?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
So that was really, really, that was one of my goals, right? Because a lot of, you talked about gatekeeping before. I cut my teeth on horror. Like my very first memories of reading or of, Where the Wild Things Are. That's still my favorite book. And that's a very scary book. And so if you think about Max traveling and he's in this different world and it's scary and there's monsters and he rules all the monsters. So Where the Wild Things Are was my very first book. And I love my very first favorite book. And it's a horror book, actually, for kids.
Oh, I love the illustrations in that book. Yeah, I really do. They're wonderful. Like, I think they've held up through the test of time as well.
Yes, I have several ornaments based on those on my tree that are basically on the book. I love that book. I have like a Jack in the Box. But anyway, so I graduated to like Poe, and then Shirley Jackson, and then Flannery O'Connor, and then Stephen King. So I kind of like grew up on horror. That's kind of like the foundation for a lot of my reading. And so one of the things we do, and this is actually relevant because next month, February, is Women in Horror Month. And so what Mocha Memoirs has done over the last 10 years is every couple of years we'll release an anthology of just women horror writers. And so the first one was like the Grotesquerie. 2 years after that, we did Mocha's Dark Brew. A few years after that, we did Black Magic Women, which is Black women horror writers. And then this year we're doing Slice Girls, which is a charity anthology which will come out on around February 1st through the 5th to kind of commemorate and help support and amplify the message that women do write horror and that women are actually good at it. There's this myth that women don't write horror or don't write horror well. And that is the whole purpose of Women in Horror Month, to kind of amplify the message that women do write horror. And they've been doing that this is their 12th year, if I'm not mistaken. So we've been participating as well. So my publishing company, that's my role, is to be able to take underrepresented groups and kind of like women not being in horror, right? That's not a thing according to certain people. They still have certain publisher positions who publish a whole table of contents, and it's not one single woman in the list of 15 stories. So we definitely want to keep promoting that women write horror and that they write horror well and that they do it at a professional level. And so you shouldn't be surprised that in Slay, the majority of the women contributors are women. And that's kind of, I didn't plan that, but as I was going through and just picking stories, that's kind of the way it ended up.
Yeah. And that's a good topic. I'm going to do the station ID real quick, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, with my special guest, Nicole Givens Kurtz. We're here live today on WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are the Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And you can also catch the podcast on theadammessershow.com. That is a great topic, Nicole. It's actually kind of like a hot topic, I think, in the not just the horror genre publishing, but just in publishing in general. And the thing is, to me, it's like I'm okay if, like if somebody does like an all-black anthology or somebody does an all-white anthology, I'm okay with whatever. All-women anthology, it doesn't bother me, whatever it is. The thing that I don't like is when somebody does it just to be exclusionary, when they say, oh, well, like you said, there was a horror anthology where there were no women on the roster or the table of contents or whatever. Like, it doesn't bother me that there's no women on the table of contents, as long as the person was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to publish, right? But if they were like, oh, well, we don't want to publish any women, or we don't want to publish any black people, or we don't want to do this or whatever, that's where I have a problem. That's what I see sometimes, is that, like, for example, in this, I'm in a bunch of online groups like you are, these author groups or whatever. There are gatekeepers, that are like, oh, well, Pulp Fiction is only this, or Pulp Fiction is only that, or comic books is only this, or comic books, horror is only this or only that. And those folks there's still a bunch of gatekeepers out there, but those folks, they're becoming fewer and fewer and less, and like their standpoint is becoming so like outdated, and it's become so like, just, hey, why, man? Why would you think like that? That I don't think that is the norm anymore. I think people are being more inclusive now than they ever have been in the whole history of publishing. I mean, there's still a lot of room for work, though. So what's your take on that, and how do you feel about that?
I do have an issue with people who only. So it is. I think many people know at this point that it is not politically correct to say I only want white males in this anthology. What they do is it's very much passive, systemic. This is what is instead they'll say this is I picked all the quality stories. And so when I see a publisher get called out for having an all-male anthology, or there are no people of color in your table of contents anthology, they'll say, well, I picked all the best stories. Well, without understanding perhaps that that's actually, when you say I only picked the best stories, your definition of what the best stories is colored by who you are as the editor, right? And so if you only believe that stories that have a certain cadence, that take place in a certain area, that have certain wordage that is similar to your background, then you're going to find stories that deviate from that, where the protagonist is black and a male, or where the writer the protagonist is a female and she's talking about her, something that is specific to women at that time. You're not going to be able to see the value in that, because your criteria for what the best stories are deeply rooted to your demographic. So you have to work on that. You have to be aware of that. And
can I interject with that too?
Aren't.
Can I ask you, like, so how does that differ from, like, say if, and I get where you're talking about, like, our social, political, economic biases and backgrounds and things like that. How does that differ though from like, say an all black anthology? How does it
So here
differ?
it is.
Because that's a
Oh
that's a
yeah,
big
here's the
question that
difference.
comes out. That's one of the things
Yeah.
that people I don't feel like they
Well,
understand.
right. It's the same as the question is, well, why is there a Black History Month, right? Why is there a White History Month? It's the same question. You're just changing up the object because there are 100 years worth of white male horror, right? So in order to again amplify and kind of promote and spotlight this group that doesn't have 100 years of representation
Yeah.
in horror
Yeah.
or in science fiction or in the case of Black History Month, because American history has decided to cull the contributions of African Americans to America or the United States. We have this month where we're focusing solely on that as a way of amplifying and spotlighting this gross underrepresented earth, right?
Yeah.
So that's why when people go, oh, why do you're only accepting Black authors? That's kind of racist. First of all, Black people can't be racist. We don't have that power structure. We're not the dominant race in the United States. So we could be president, but we can't be racist because racism is about systematic power. All right, so that's a dichotomy that doesn't work. And so, well, why do you have an anthology where you're only taking people of color? Because we're spotlighting these authors and these stories that don't get told because there's 200 years of white male stories.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the reason why I bring that up is because I see that same argument over and over and over again. I'm like, and when I see it, I'm like, dude, if you can't understand why there's a need for, platform and, just like with the comic book characters or whatever, it's like, okay, well, why aren't the publishers putting money into new and original characters of, people of color? Where is that, divergence there, and I think it still goes back to the gatekeepers. And then you have some folks, like I was just reading this article the other day. You have some folks that they have good intentions or whatever, and they still are not like, I don't know how to say it. It was a thing about Twitter where they were talking about representation and that you shouldn't, like if you're not gay, you shouldn't write about gay characters, or if you're not Black, you shouldn't write about Black characters or whatever. And they were talking about that, and then like there's all this cancel culture surrounding that as well. And it's one of those things where it's a touchy subject, and I feel like it comes up over and over and over again. I see it over and over and over again in the different groups or whatever. And I kind of feel like it's important because it's like, okay, well, if, for example, if I had wanted to publish an African diaspora vampire anthology, right? And I'm the only white person on the whole editing process or whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't like this or I don't like that or whatever. Then what am I doing? Why would I be the one trying to publish that? But that's what's happening in film. That's what's happening in music. That's what's happening in publishing. That's what's happening in entertainment. You get people who are the gatekeepers or whatever. So like in that situation, I would be the editor. I would be the gatekeeper of, who gets published and who doesn't. And I feel like that's a big issue right now. I feel like that's like, so, what are your thoughts on how we can, move ahead, and how can we make things, more progressive, I guess, or more of an even platform for people of color?
It's a nuanced question. Okay, so there are a couple of things. One is you have people who are publishing and producing films that are not, like, for example, I'm trying to think. Oh, let me do Star Trek Discovery. Star Trek Discovery this season, and I'm not going to do any spoilers, but the showrunners are not, one of the producers is a Black male, and one of the producers is a woman, but the executive producers, of course, is like Eugene Roddenberry and Tim Roth, I think. What someone else. So, but the diversity of what has happened in discovery this year is fantastic. On all fronts. But I also watched like the Ready Room, which happens, which is like behind the scenes. And you meet with directors, you meet with the writers. A lot of the writers and directors this season are not white people. They're people of color. They're like a couple of, maybe two of the writers are women. So there's like this huge diversity of writers and a huge diversity of directors. And that shows up, I guess, and not Nicole Hamilton, but you can be the white guy saying, hey, I want to do this, and I want to do this anthology. I got this great idea. I want to feature people of color, and I want them to be werewolves. Who's in the room with you? You have to have people in the room where it happens. And so if that doesn't happen, you can't center those things because you don't have the experience, the background, the knowledge base for the nuanced pieces that go into those other cultures, right? And so it's extraordinarily important that, not that you can't, this is what I tell people all the time. Oh, Nicole, I want to write a Black character. Can I do that? I had someone message me and ask me that question. I'm a white woman and I want to write a Black character. What do you think about that? Can I do that? I mean, Niecy Shaw and Cynthia Ward have a great series called Writing the Other that helps writers and tells them what to think about, and it gives them tools to write the other. And so I feel like if you want to do that, you got to do some work. It's not the same as saying, I want to write about an anthropologist, right? And you go talk to an anthropologist, and there you go. Because Black people or any ethnic group, as you well know, are not a monolith. There are nuances in every culture.
Human beings, and they are. Everybody has. This is the thing that gets me for people's disconnect. Everybody's a human being. We're, like my wife is from Mexico City. She's Mexican. I love my wife. I love Mexican culture. I love her heritage. I love the fact that my kids are, half Mexican and they're half American with, they're Mexican American, but you know what I'm saying, with the background. I love that. I'm not Mexican. I'm never going to be Mexican. I can appreciate her culture, and I can love her, and I can love her culture, and I can love the food and the music and all these other things. I can love about that, and I can appreciate it. But at the end of the day, I'm still not Mexican. So, I don't speak from that perspective. Woman.
There's pieces of her lived-in experience that you're not going to have.
Yeah, and just vice versa. And so, her experience is not the same as mine. And I think that's a big topic. I see it over and over again. It's a really big topic, especially in anything with anything in the public eye. It does percolate, and it does ripple through all parts of society.
But I definitely think that it's doable.
I
think what you're seeing with film and what you're seeing across the board and all these creative spaces, or that people are saying, hey, we've had this big push a few months ago about Black Lives Matter and trying to get, talking about racial equality. And they're like, hey, we can do some representation. We can do those things. But some of them are not doing their due diligence in terms of bringing people of color in the room where the planning happens, in the room where and making sure that their approach to diversifying is authentic and respectful.
Yeah, not just trying to jump on a bandwagon. That's the biggest thing too. Is not just hey, this is the hot topic for today. I don't know, and I see a lot of that too. I'm like, oh, it's cringe to me. It's like, oh my gosh, why are you doing that? Stop. So, and I feel like too, people when people sit down and they say, hey, you know what, they get to know each other, they realize, yes, there are cultural differences, but people have more in common with each other than they don't have in common. And I don't know, it's just one of those things where I kind of feel like folks that don't get it, they're really missing out.
Oh yes they are.
Yeah.
Yes they are.
So we're going to do our half-hour break, and then when we come back, I would really love to talk about your new book, A Theft Most Foul, and I'm pretty excited because you've got that. Is it coming out, or is it already out?
It comes out January 20th.
Okay, perfect. All right, so everybody, we're going to be back in just a few minutes. Please stay tuned. And Sebastian, you want to play a little bit more for us before we go to the station break? All right, here's Sebastian Messer, everybody, playing some guitar.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming. And it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going. And you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to wruu.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
This is a message from the Georgia State Department of Public Health. There is a State of Georgia hotline people can call with questions or if they think they may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It is 1-844-442-2681. If you believe you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to the novel coronavirus, please contact your primary care doctor, an urgent care clinic, or your local federally qualified healthcare center. Please do not show up at an emergency room or healthcare facility unannounced. More information can be found at dph.georgia.gov. This portion of WRUU Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Adam Messer Show. And I'm your host, Adam Messer. And on this second half of the hour, we have our special guest, Nicole Givens Kurtz. And we're going to be talking about your new book, Nicole. I'm pretty excited about it. So do you mind if I read the blurb?
Yeah, I guess.
All right. So this is a theft most foul. Sent to investigate the theft of a sacred artifact, can Hawk Tasifa unravel, and I'm hoping I'm saying the name correctly, unravel the threads of conspiracy before it destroys the order. Following her success in Gould, Hawk Prentice Tasifa returns to her university to unravel a mystery. Someone has broken into the museum of the goddess and stolen its most sacred artifact, attacked two of the guards, and is trying to frame her mentor. Under pressure from the order, Prentice is urged to find the culprits, but not all as it seems. But not all is as it seems. Can Hawk Tasifa see through the echoes of her past and find the dirty birds before they destroy everything she loves? So it sounds very interesting. I love that it's you tie in like a university and some magic and all that other stuff there. So can you talk a little bit more about the new book, A Theft Most Foul?
Oh, sure. So A Theft Most Foul is the second story in my Kingdom of Avis series. The first one is called Kill Three Birds. So in the Kingdom of Avis, for those who haven't read the first book, in the Kingdom of Avis, all the people are established based on their avian clans. So, and there are 5 clans that constitute or make up the order, which is kind of organized like the Catholic Church. You have the owl that sits at the head that is kind of like the Pope. You have cardinals that are like cardinals. Then you go further down, you have like hawks, who are the investigative arm of the order. So what they do and then you have condors beneath them. So in Avis, every city is called an egg, and every state or province is called a nest. So in A Kills Reverse, the first book, Princess is sent to Gold Egg to investigate missing girls because they suspect magic is involved. So there are the eagles in every egg are the policing force, but when they can't figure it out, they submit a request for a hawk to come in and investigate further. And the reason for this is that hawks, like Prentice, has the ability to see the unseen. And so they have this ability to see otherworldly things and magic and other things that traditional avian people cannot. One of the drawbacks to this, however, is that the more hawks use this ability and switch between their hawk eyes and their human eyes, over time, they'll go blind. And so it is a trait that is passed down matrilineally. So all hawks are women, and they get that ability from their mom. So Princess is in her 5th year as an investigator, and she's just coming from Gold, and she gets an assignment to go down to Sunday, to the University of Sunday, where the order sends all their kids. It's like a very prestigious university. And it's where she went as well, to investigate a high-profile heist. So the Five-Feather Crown, in theory, is this magical artifact that the goddess, which was a phoenix, plucked the feathers of the 5 ruling avian families and put together this crown. In theory, anyone who touches it is supposed to die, but it's gone missing. So there's lots of questions around who stole it, why are they dead, and who attacked these 2 guards at the museum. So plus, I call it my Kingdom of Avis Dan Brown story, right? Angels and Demons, which is Dan Brown's novel. I love those stories, and so it's kind of my attempt at a Dan Brown heist artifact story, but with birds.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I love the way that you're talking about with the hawks. You know, that I feel like that's really good character development too, because nobody wants to read about a perfect character. So it's like, oh, they have the super ability or whatever, but it comes at a price. It's like, they can't just use it indefinitely. Right. And
no.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool that you kind of built in that the Achilles heel or whatever for that character. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and Princess has to be very careful with how often she uses it, because if she uses it a lot, it deteriorates her eyes that much faster, right? She can't get back to her human sight, switch back to her human sight. So it makes the investigations, like, you're like, as a reader might say, well, then why doesn't she just use her hawk vision? She's going to be very selective when she uses it, when she decides to see the unseen, right? Mm-hmm. Because she can't just use it at will, because it's not a limitless ability. And so, and once she does go blind, they'll retire her. And so she is very, her whole purpose in life is, all she's ever known is, I'm a hawk, I'm going to grow up and work for the order. And so, but she's back at university, and she's paired with Galen, who's a condor. Now, condors are the kind of like the muscle for the investigators. It's usually a hawk and a condor paired together. And so she's back with Galen, and Galen and she were, I don't want to spoil too much, but they were at university together. Mm-hmm. And so having Galen back with her on a case is very disorienting for Princess, because she hasn't seen Galen in like 5 years. And so, and Galen is she's a rough and tumble condor. She's like missing an arm. She has like a scar down the left side of her face. She's very blunt. She's quick with her sword. So, she's a condor. Mm-hmm. She's a fighter. And so it gets to be a lot more intrigue here, because there are a lot of, like, it's a whodunit. It's a heist story. Mm-hmm. You think about like a Thomas Crown affair, right? What is happening? Who stole this? but there's way more things that happen. And for people who read Kill Three Birds, this is an expansion. A Thefmo style expands like the Kingdom of Avis. So now they're in a different nest. They're getting to see different birds than they saw in Gold. So like nightjars. So one of the things I do in my world building with Kingdom of Avis is I get to find new birds. And since Sullen Day is kind of like Alexandria in Egypt, it's a lot of things have a Middle Eastern flair. It's very sunny. It's in a warmer climate. It's kind of like a Mediterranean climate. So there's lots of things about Sullen Day that's very different than Gold, which is like a remote mountain community, very small. But so there's lots of things readers will learn about. So I use nightjars. I got to use nightjars as another bird clan this time, and I got to use vulture guinea fowls this time as well. So one of the beautiful things about the Kingdom of Avis is I get to find great birds and find out how they behave and incorporate that into the behavior of my characters.
I think that's really cool. I've always loved Middle Eastern settings. Like, you know, I think as a kid, the first ones that I ever saw were like Indiana Jones. You know, so it's not necessarily a heist story, but it's kind of like a, you know, action adventure.
He is stealing
thriller.
Something.
Huh?
So Indy is stealing something. So
yeah. It's cool because you know he's the one doing it. So it's not, I guess. Anyway, I've always liked that kind of story. I think it's pretty cool. So are they, when you talk about their birds, like I saw the cover, are they humanistic or are they like humanoid birds?
They're
or
humans, but they're humans, but they have bird characteristics. So like,
okay.
So like my vultures, like they don't eat cooked meat. Like they only eat like carrion. And then in the first book, the people that were like roosters, they only at their restaurant they only sold like feed. Like so they didn't. So it's, you got to read it. I want everyone to read it, but if they don't eat meat in real life as a bird, their human counterpart in the Kingdom of Avis don't. If they only eat roadkill in real life as a vulture, then their counterpart doesn't eat cooked food.
That is so cool. So what kind of research did you have to do to get into the, like learning about the birds and all?
Yes, because I know someone out there is a bird enthusiast, and they're going to be like, that's not right. So all the cities, all the eggs in the Kingdom of Avis are named after bird watchers.
Oh, cool.
White male bird watchers. And then all of the nests or the provinces or states are named after black birders and and women bird watchers.
Oh, that's interesting. What made you want to set up that dynamic?
Well, one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot, and especially after, is African American bird watchers or bird enthusiasts. And so I try to kind of, again, amplify, promote, and kind of put some shine on their names so that if people are reading the Kingdom of Avis and they run across that name later, they can be like, I might want to learn more about Dr. So-and-so, who was a black bird watcher or black bird scientist. I can't think of the name. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What they're called. But yeah, so that's like the main city in the Kingdom of Avis is Lanham. It is named after Dr. Lanham, who is a professor of birds at Clemson. So, where he was at the time I was writing this. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to. I think it's a really cool way to interweave those things. And are you a bird watcher yourself?
I do like birds.
Tell me more about that.
But just casually, I just casually watch them and try to name them, and yeah.
What gave you the idea? I mean, like when you started thinking about like this, how did the idea just kind of hit you, or were you, can you think about the moment when you had the idea to write this series?
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what. So I was I want to write a fantasy, but I didn't want to write. I write mostly science fiction, mysteries, and horror. Everything I write usually is very gritty, very intense, very, but last year was very challenging on a whole bunch of levels for many people. And I was like, I want to write something fun. And I think I want to write a fantasy story, but I want it to be light. And actually, my husband's like, this is called Kill Three Birds. I thought you were writing something fun. Oh, but it's so fun to write. Then I thought, well, I did not want to do fairies and dwarves and the typical fantasy stereotypes or tropes. And so I was like, I need something that's going to be expansive enough, but also fun enough so that I could do like a bunch of different groups and a bunch of different things. I think I'm just going to do birds because I like birds. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about the order, and I was like, oh, there could be an owl. There are already cardinals. And I was like, what really got me was when I was thinking of the main character, I was like, I always write mysteries. So most of my stories either involve an investigator, a detective, or a strong sense of suspense. And so I was like, my protagonist is an investigator. What makes her different from, what makes her a great investigator? I'm like, what if she could see things that other people can't? Because hawks have really great eyesight. And so that's what we came up with. That's when I was like, oh, she could see the unseen. What if she could see stuff that no one else can because she's a hawk? And it kind of just,
that's a really cool mechanic.
It's just kind of spiraled, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really cool mechanic.
They're really fun to write. They really are. And that's what I was looking for. Kind of dragged me out of the doldrums that was last year, is being able to find a character, build a world from scratch, and have fun playing in it. And that's kind of what I've done.
That's awesome. Hey, everybody, you're tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show here on WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. If you're just now tuning in, you can catch the podcast on theadammessershow.com. And my special guest today is Nicole Givens Kurtz, who is an author, and we're talking about her new book, A Theft Most Foul. Everybody, off the air, Nicole and I were talking because her setting is with the Order, and that's what you call your group. And then with my my Savannah Vampire novel series, the Order was my group of guys and bad guys or whatever, that they were like an extension of the Knights Templar, but on that side they actually hunt down anything that's occult. They're kind of like they're not even necessarily associated with the church anymore, but I use that group, the Order, because I was like, oh, this is so neat the way. And when you started talking about how the Order was structured after the church and then had all the different parts to it, I was like, I really like how you did that. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. I spent a lot of time building that world, and it's actually one of the most. As an author, as a writer, I've grown in the last 20 years since I wrote my first Sybil Lewis series, in terms of her world building constituted bullet points in a 2-page Word document, right? Now, the world building for Kingdom of Avis has a map. I actually commissioned Sarah Macklin to create a map for the Kingdom of Avis, which is included with the book, inside the book. Mm-hmm. But I had a map created. I have a OneNote that has 27 tabs of how magic works, how money works, because money in the Kingdom of Avis is called a bird song. How, and for each story, characters, minor characters, what they look like, ArtStation and YouTube have been great for providing visual inspiration for how people look and how things work, and it's just been fabulous. It was so much fun to just be able to lose myself in creating something fun and new. Mm-hmm. Especially last year, things were just so challenging and difficult. So A Theft Most Foul is the second in a trilogy, and then there'll be one more after this, and then another story arc will start. But A Theft Most Foul just deals with the heist. But of course, it spirals into more than that. So it's an offshoot of the church. There are personal issues that she has to confront with Galen. There are, and her mentor, like she has to investigate, like her mentor, like and of course in the Kingdom of Davis, Rooks are the ones that do the teaching, because Rooks are very smart birds, and so they're the ones who teach, and she was very close to Rook Renner, and so now he is the one who's like over the museum and who stands accused of having stolen this type artifact. It's a high pressure case. Everyone's looking at it because it's like, this is a goddess's crown. What?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It's a big deal. And so there's a lot of elements, lots of pressure on Prentice. And so you get to see her.
So when you call it
when
you call it an urban fantasy, is this an urban fantasy or is this more like a high fantasy or what?
I do not call it an urban fantasy.
What is it? Because I know you were talking about urban fantasy earlier. I just wasn't sure what you were.
Yeah.
I didn't know what you were calling this because I know it's a fantasy, but I don't know what like genre of it is.
So I've been calling it I call it a speculative mystery, but it's a fantasy mystery, basically. If you look at the title, the subtitle is it's like a Kingdom of Avis mystery. And so it's kind of in the same vein as like Dresden Files, or where you have magic and an investigator in a mystery, but the setting is fantastic. So
Okay, so
which is why it's not urban fantasy, because it's not set in an urban city. It's all fantasy.
I didn't know because when you were talking about it like kind of like a Middle Eastern setting or whatever, I didn't know if that's what you were modeling it on, but it makes sense now that you've got all these different names for these cities and the nests and all that. So I just didn't know if it was like kind of like based off of Earth or if it was like its own little world or what it was.
It's its own little world. It's actually a lot like Avatar, the Last Airbender, where they have like this whole other world, right? It's kind of like a whole other. It's not on Earth. It's just a different realm.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for clarifying that for me, because there's it's so crazy now, but there are like so many different subgenres out there. It's hard to keep up sometimes, in my opinion. I mean, it really is. Sometimes it's like, wow, like I see all these different subgenres, and I'm like. I guess you can drill down as much as you want to, but I kind of get lost because I would have thought it was a fantasy, but it kind of makes sense because it's a heist, it's a mystery, but it's like a blend between,
It is. It's a mashup. So when I like categorize it on Amazon, they go into fantasy.
Okay.
The setting is fantastic, right? So it's all fantasy. It's just that the plot is mysterious, but it's fantasy.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. That's I haven't written any fantasy. Like I said, as a kid, I used to read it. Mostly like I read Lord of the Rings, and I used to love this series called the Xanth novels by Piers Anthony, and it was based off of puns, and there were like a million puns in this book, but it was a fantasy setting or whatever. But I used to read all those, and I don't know. I just used to like that as a kid, but I haven't read any fantasy books as an adult at all. I mean, like I really haven't read a whole lot of fiction until the last couple of years because I just mostly focus on leadership and management and self-development and those kind of things. And so just the last couple of years, I've been mostly getting into like trying to check out my friends' books. Reading that, checking out like other stuff, and just trying to see what piques my interest. I kind of like mysteries and westerns. I don't know. I mean, like it's just one of those things where I enjoy writing fiction more than I enjoy reading fiction now, I guess, because I like biographies and I like listening to people. Like I just finished a Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights audiobook. And so I love storytelling. I love listening to storytelling. It's just one of those things where like when I'm reading, I'd rather read, like real life stuff or about real people. And, but every once in a while, like I'll try to pick up a friend's book and I'll read through it and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like Rebecca Hamrick has this Adelan sci-fi funny. It's a sci-fi humor series, and so whenever she puts out a new novella, I pick it up and read it. And of course, I picked up Slay, and I try to pick up different books of my friends that I like their stuff or whatever. So. But that sounds like a really interesting series, and it sounds like you spent a lot of time with the world building too, so it's pretty cool. So where can people, we've got like about a minute left on this first hour, where can people check out your writing and your books?
You can find it at NicoleGivensKurtz.net. You can find it also at MochaMemoirsPress.com. I'm also on Twitter at Nicole G. Kurtz and on Facebook at Nicole G. Kurtz.
Awesome. All right. So everybody